And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Bix Beiderbecke, his life and times and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. The first one's called Bix Beiderbecke Volume 1, Singing the Blues, a compilation of his best loved hits. There's also a cover of his own composition, a piano classic called In a Mist. He recorded the music in collaboration with the Frankie Trombo Orchestra. Another album called The Legendary Bix, released in 1927. This one's a great album compilation of Bix's best works. And many of these songs are taken from his performances in small ensembles, like an iconic performance with the Wolverines, and a song called Singing the Blues. This was a popular composition by Beiderbecke. Bix opens up the song with a beautiful clarinet solo, and two highlights of the song is lyrical cornet playing and introspective mood. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Bix Beiderbecke, his life and times and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. The first one's called Bix Beiderbecke Volume 1, Singing the Blues. Many of Beiderbecke's greatest recordings were made in the 20s. This album is one such compilation, featuring songs like Ostrich Walk to Way Down Yonder in New Orleans, a compilation of his best love hits. There's also a cover of his own composition, a piano classic called In a Mist. He recorded the music in collaboration with the Frankie Trombo Orchestra. There's also a series of very talented artists like guitarist Eddie Lang, clarinetist Jimmy Dorsey, trombonist Bill Rank, and others. Also, he's got some great renditions of the song Clarinet Marmalade, Hoagy Carmichael's Riverboat Shuffle, and Ringing and Twisting. Another album called The Legendary Bix, released in 1927. This is a great album compilation of Bix's best works. Also, many of them are taken from his performances in small ensembles, like an iconic performance with the Wolverines. Also, some of his best loved classics, the song In a Mist, makes an appearance. For newcomers to Bix Beiderbecke music, this is a great introduction to his beautiful cornet playing. So, the Wolverines were a renowned jazz band of the era. The song In a Mist reflected his style in all its brilliance, one of his most famous compositions. So overall, a great compilation of Beiderbecke's playing alongside various bands, the Wolverines and other ensembles, and it's a great introduction to his cornet playing. The song Singing the Blues was a popular composition by Beiderbecke. He also performed the song alongside the Frankie Trombo Orchestra in 1927. Bix opens up the song with a beautiful clarinet solo. His solo is very improvised and showcases his beautiful clarinet playing. It is a sonorous swinging vibe and has a slow tempo to it. The song was also instrumental in shaping the evolution of jazz at the time. Several other musicians were inspired by his song, and it went on to become inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1927. Two highlights of the song, its lyrical cornet playing and introspective mood. So that was some insight into some of Bix Beiderbecke's best hits of all time, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's about cornetist Bix Beiderbecke. Now it's time for some trending album news. Acclaimed pianist Steve Holt is out with a new album called Impact. This one's a great compilation of songs, all original compositions that he produced over the last year. The album sees him tackling new ground, blending innovation and tradition into the music. There's a lot of creativity in how he approaches different musical landscapes. Overall, joyful, dynamic, and very energetic music. A song called Second Voyage sees the listener taken into a dreamy journey. This one's inspired by a Herbie Hancock classic called Maiden Voyage. There's a lot of other great compositions in the album, also a beautiful cover of the Canadian national anthem, and a cover of Tom McIntosh's Cupbearers. Joining Steve on the music is the Steve Holt Jazz Impact Quintet. There's Perry White on saxophone, Kevin Turcotte on trumpet, Duncan Hopkins on bass, and Terry Clark on drums. So this album is a great compilation of music bridging the gap between the traditional and the innovative. And this album is going up for release on April 25th. For more information, please visit www.steveholtmusic.com. So that was some trending album news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Bix Beiderbecke's best albums of all time. The first one's called the Bix Beiderbecke Story Volume 3, Whiteman Days. This one's a compilation of his best hits alongside the Paul Whiteman Orchestra. There's also some songs that he played alongside another jazz legend, trumpeter Frankie Trombo. Another song called Davenport Blues. This one's a very beautiful lyrical song, a beautiful tribute to Beiderbecke's hometown in Davenport in Iowa. The next one's an album called Bix Beiderbecke Volume 2 at the Jazz Band Ball. This album features more great music he recorded while playing for Paul Whiteman's orchestra. The next one's an album called Riverboat Shuffle. This album's a great introduction to Bix's works, especially in his early days. There's a series of his best songs here taken from various performances. And an album called Bixology. This album features all his songs into one compilation arranged in chronological order. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Bix Beiderbecke, his life and times and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. The first one's called the Bix Beiderbecke Story Volume 3 White Mondays. This one's a great collaboration album. It sees Bix paired up with the Paul Whiteman Orchestra. There's also some songs that he played alongside another jazz legend, trumpeter Frankie Trumbo. Also included on the album, one of Bix Beiderbecke's favorite piano compositions, In a Mist. Some of the other top tracks, Tain't So Honey, Tain't So, That's My Weakness Now, and China Boy. Another song called Davenport Blues, a very beautiful lyrical song. On the original 1938 performance, Bix Beiderbecke's cornet improvisations were legendary. The song is a beautiful tribute to Beiderbecke's hometown in Davenport in Iowa. The song has a nostalgic tune as he recollects memories from his hometown. It's a popular blues song. The next one is an album called Bix Beiderbecke Volume 2 at the Jazz Band Ball. The album features more great music he recorded while playing for Paul Whiteman's orchestra. On this album, we see him collaborating alongside some great musicians of his time from Eddie Lang to Chauncey Morehouse. Some of the highlights include Our Bungalow of Our Dreams, There'll Be a Time, and Jazz Me Blues. So at the time, Bix was very innovative in his playing, and many of his best concepts and ideas are showcased in this compilation. This album gives us a compilation of vintage music full of joy and exuberance. The next one's an album called Riverboat Shuffle. This one's a great introduction to Bix's works, especially in his early days. There's a series of his best songs here taken from various performances. The album starts off with the song Riverboat Shuffle that he performed alongside the Wolverines, and then the song Davenport Blues performed alongside the Rhythmic Jugglers group. And then there's some music he played alongside the legendary Frankie Trumbo. The emphasis here is on music that he played in wild combo sessions. Also included Beiderbecke's beautiful piano solo In a Mist, a song that was accorded into the Grammy Hall of Fame in later years. So this album is a great introduction to his music, also a peek into his greatest hits. Another similar album featuring Bix's greatest hits, the album Bixology. This album features all his performances in one. It features 200 of his performances, every song that he played during his career. It sees him playing alongside his most iconic groups, from the Wolverines, the Sioux City Six, the Broadway Bellops, and others. On this album also there's an unaccompanied piano solo on his famous composition In a Mist. Also, the songs in this album are arranged in chronological order. So that was some insight into more great albums by Bix Beiderbecke, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. We've come to an end of this week's episode of the Jazz Update, so now for a recap of everything that we discussed on today's program. On this week's episode of the Jazz Update, it's about a leading cornetist and composer from the Hall of Fame of Jazz, Bix Beiderbecke. Beiderbecke was famous for his cornet playing style, the lyricism, the innovations. He started out playing in Chicago as a teenager. Some of his first notable collaborations included alongside Louis Armstrong, King Oliver, and others. In 1926, he started out performing alongside trumpet legend Frankie Trumbo and his orchestra. In later years, he was one of the leading solo performers in the Paul Whiteman Orchestra. His performances alongside them rocketed him to fame as a cornetist and composer. So that was a bit about his biography. Now let's talk about some of his best albums of all time. The first one's a song called Davenport Blues, a very beautiful lyrical song. On the 1938 performance, Beiderbecke's cornet improvisations were legendary. This one's a beautiful tribute to Beiderbecke's hometown in Davenport in Iowa. The next one's an album called the Bix Beiderbecke Story Volume 2, Bix and Tram. In this album, it's a great collaboration between Frankie Trumbo, a saxophonist who was known as Tram, and Beiderbecke on cornet. There's several great classics here covered in Beiderbecke's original style. The next one's one of Beiderbecke's all-time favorite compositions, a song called In a Mist. He performs a great piano solo on the song. So basically, this song combines improvisation and written melodies, and the song is based on French Impressionism. So that was some insight into the life and times and best hits of Bix Beiderbecke, and that brings me to an end of this week's episode of the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan. Don't forget to check out my YouTube archives of today's program on my YouTube channel, the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan. So I'll see you again next week. Have a great week ahead.